Hello class, this is the beginning of the Intro to IM2 test review worksheet. We'll see how many questions I can get done in 15 minutes, and then run out of space. I'll start questions in the next video. Let's take a look at question number 1. Notice the instructions first, class. Round all answers to 1 decimal place, and you must show all your work. Number 1, the endpoints of a line segment are at 3, 11 and 8, 2. What is the length of the segment? So we're going to figure out length. Remember class, length equals distance. So in this case, we do not have a coordinate plane or a coordinate grid. So the easiest way to do this is to use the distance formula or the distance shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and use the distance formula, and when I use that, I'm going to label my values x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2. Please keep in the habit of doing that so you plug things in the right way. So the distance formula is the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So x sub 2 is 8 minus x sub 1 is 3. 8 minus 3 squared plus y sub 2, which is 2, minus y sub 1. Remember, the minus sign is part of the equation. Minus, and y sub 1 has to be, or happens to be, positive 11, so 2 minus 11 squared. Let's start to simplify this. Do the part in parentheses first. 8 minus 5 is 5 squared plus 2 minus 11 is negative 9 squared. Let's continue to simplify. 5 squared is 25. Negative 9 squared is positive 81. Remember class, the nice part about using the distance formula or Pythagorean theorem is when you get to this point, all your numbers should be positive because you're squaring your numbers, and squaring any number is going to turn it positive. Let's continue to simplify. We have the square root of 25 plus 81, which is 106. So square root of 106. And we'll go ahead and put that in your calculator, and you should get the square root of 106 approximately 10.3 when we've rounded it correctly. And so our answer to question number 1 is 10.3, and they don't tell us what the unit of measure is, so we'll just write the word units. Alright, question number 2. Now class, one more thing about number 1. If you want to do this using the distance shortcut, do that please, but if you're not getting 10.3, please check and make sure you are using the shortcut correctly. Okay, question number 2. Find the midpoint of segment AB if A is at 64, negative 13, and B is at 2, 53. Now I could use the midpoint shortcut here, but I'm going to go ahead and just use the midpoint formula. So the midpoint formula tells us that the midpoint of any 2 points is going to be equal to x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. You know what I just noticed? I did not label my points, my values of my points. Let's do that now. I'm going to make 64 x sub 1, negative 13 is y sub 1, and then 2 is x sub 2, and 53 is y sub 2. So I'm going to do the midpoint is equal to x sub 1, which is 64, plus x sub 2, which is 2, and that all is over 2. We divide that by 2. There's our x value of our midpoint. And then we've got negative 13 plus 53, y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Let's go ahead and simplify this. 64 plus 2 is 66. Still divide that by 2. Negative 13 plus 53 is 40, and that's still divided by 2. And we can simplify these further. 66 divided by 2 is 33, and 40 divided by 2 is 20. So our midpoint is at 33, 20. Now we don't have a graph here, so we can't check to see if that midpoint makes sense. I would just say go back, check your work one more time to make sure you didn't make any math mistakes. Take a look at question number 3. Find the slope of segment GH if G is at 5, 12 and H is at -5, 3. Now I'm going to write this formula down, class, because we just did this toward the end of the unit. To find the slope of any segment that's connecting these two endpoints, the way you find that is you take y sub 2 and subtract y sub 1, and that's going to be over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now I've seen some of your work, class, and there are some of you who are still flipping these around. Make sure the change in y is on top and the change of x is on bottom. Remember, it's rise over run, and rise is a vertical change, meaning up and down. I'll put that in the margin right here. And that's a change in y, and run is a change left to right, and that's a change in the x value. So let's go ahead and label our points. I'll label this x sub 1, y sub 1. Let's label this x sub 2, y sub 2. And let's plug the points in. Y sub 2 is 3. Remember, the minus sign is part of the equation, so I write that first. Now I plug in y sub 1. So it's 3 minus 12. X sub 2 is -5. The minus sign, again, is part of the equation, so minus. And then we have a +5 as y sub 1. Sorry, x sub 1. So 3 minus 12 is -9. -5 minus 5 is -10. Class, use your calculator if you struggle with negative numbers. I don't want to see any of you making this into 0. Put in your calculator, use the minus sign, and then the 5, and then subtract 5, and you'll get the correct answer. Now, last thing here is, if you have a negative divided by a negative, that's the same thing as saying the opposite rule, which is a negative times a negative, which always turns positive. Well, a negative divided by a negative also turns positive. So if we've got a negative on top and bottom, we can actually write that fraction as a positive slope. So this line is actually a positive slope. It means our slope, let's fix that. It means our slope is going from left to right. If we looked at our graph, our slope would be going up this direction. From left to right, it's going up. It's a positive 9/10 slope. I'm going to stop this video because those 3 questions seem to go together, and we'll start up again in the next video on question number 4.